Hey guys, it's David from the DPAF. It's Thursday, March 21st, and I wanted to kick off today by mentioning that the Federal Reserve held interest rates at the current level at its meeting yesterday evening, and obviously the Bank of England will do the same thing when they meet today or tomorrow. And as I've been saying in my other videos, that's what the Bank of England does. They copy the Federal Reserve at every point. They do not have their own sort of philosophy or their own approach. They are an offshoot of the Federal Reserve. They posture as independent, but they are really just the London Fed. They're like a subdivision of the Federal Reserve. And so that's, it's just a state of fact. That's what they're going to do today. There's also a lot of talk in Britain, same as the US, about how the central bank has, raised interest rates, tamed inflation. Inflation's defeated, even though it's not back at the 2% target. And, a cutting of interest rates, probably back to zero, can commence, pretty soon. And, this is really just going to lead to the next wave of inflation, because in the 1970s, there was three waves of inflation. There was the first, came down, second, came down, third, came down. So we're really just at the end of the first wave of inflation here. All this talk about how, the London Fed has tamed inflation, but David Pattinson saying they haven't, is not going to be discussed a year from now when we're into the second wave of inflation. None of the journalists that are writing these articles are going to be pointing this out. And, this is because the corporate media and the central banks are one corporate entity. When the World Economic Forum meets, these corporate media companies are not there to cover the event. They are there participating in the event. They have their own booth, they have their own space, they have their own seat at the table, they're there with their wives, their husbands, whatever. They're on the panels. They are not sort of hovering over people with their microphone. They are part of the event. They are part of the corporate nexus. And, they are just masquerading as independent media. They are corporate marketing departments. And that's just what they are. So the sooner we can wake up and realize this, the better. There's been another story in the USA about how a lot of people are draining their 401k or retirement accounts to prevent the foreclosure of their homes. And a lot of Americans, same as Britain, are having a lot of added costs to home ownership beyond their mortgage, which are taxes, property tax, homeowners association or community charges, as well as insurance. As crime increases, as unemployment rises, or the costs outweigh people's salaries, insurance is going to get higher and higher, and these insurance premiums are going to make home ownership greater. People are going to be pulling money from their retirement accounts to prevent the repossession of their homes. And this is a very, very dangerous road to go down. Get your home paid off if you possibly can, or get it sold. Don't be sort of propping up a big mortgage on your home, because in a lot of cases, people are going to end up losing both. They're going to drain their retirement and they're going to go into foreclosure. They're going to lose both their retirement and their home when, you've got the option to preserve one or both at the current time. So don't let that happen to you. I've seen this happen a lot of times to people. It's very, very sad. People chase the market down instead of taking the decisive action early and, staving off grave danger. So I'm not seeing as many articles about this in Britain, but it is something that's out there in the economic environment, and I want you to be aware of it. There's been more talk of these cyber attacks. There was this story yesterday about Greggs in Britain, the sandwich shops all across the country. There's some big glitch or cyber outage. And of course, instead of saying, hey, is this our own cybersecurity authorities in Britain attacking our own companies, it's like, no, it's got to be Russia. And it's the same in the United States. On the same day, there's this big thread of cyber attacks on the US water systems. And, everything works in concert in the media. The fear has got to be highlighted, across all the G7 countries kind of simultaneously. And there's also never any suggestion on these cyber things of people saying, hey, why don't we, come off the centralized computer system? Why doesn't every Greggs shop just have its own independent computer network or go back to paper? Like when there's all these sort of voting issues in the United States, instead of saying, hey, let's get away from electronic ballots to prevent hacking, go back to paper ballots, it's no, let's just blame a foreign country and cover up fraud and corruption within our own government. There's continuing on the economic front, commercial real estate, office buildings are in huge trouble, and this is going to cause a lot of bank failures. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. I mean, the situation in America is massive. Situation in London and Canary Wharf, HSBC are pulling out. This creates such a domino effect through the financial system, through into retail, real estate, because of all the supplemental business and economic activity that comes from a big office, and obviously into residential homes where people can't pay their mortgage. And, obviously the banks have got all these mortgages and commercial real estate loans out there that can't be serviced. And, it's just a domino effect downwards. So very, very serious commercial real estate. Look out for these problems in your life. And, what's going to happen if and when they cut interest rates. Starting this summer, they'll go back to quantitative easing, and that will perpetuate the next round of inflation that I mentioned at the start of the video. So bad economic problems coming. The reason I'm doing this video is so you can be aware of them and prepare accordingly. I want people to look out for this website called numbeo.com. It provides a city index. I think you've got to go to the link at the top, find the city index part. And what it does is it shows you the costs of living in different cities all around the world, including in Britain. And it kind of marks everything on a score of 100 cents on the dollar to New York City. So New York's 100. Every city below that is the cost of living relative to New York. New York's not actually number one anymore, but it's up there. It's number 7. And what's interesting is you look at some of these cities, like in Britain, like in Manchester, for example, is like 102 on the list, and I think it's like 67 cents on the dollar to live in Manchester, compared to New York City, which is a great deal if you like Manchester, which I do. But if you look at where I am in Tbilisi, Georgia, it's like number 397 on the list. And the cost of living in Tbilisi relative to New York is 39.2 cents on the dollar. So you're saving over 60% on every transaction by living in Georgia relative to New York. And, that's a great deal if you like Georgia or if you don't like New York or whatever. But just to look at all these different cities in the world, people travel to these cities maybe on holiday or for business. And, it's really interesting to see, in an index format, the different cost differentiations compared against each other. And then obviously people place their own value in, what's it like to live in Barcelona? What's it like to live in Rome? What's it like to live in California? What's it like to live, in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia? So look at all these deals and, make an assessment. Are these cities a great place for you to live or to work or to invest relative to Britain, or is Britain still where you want to be? And, it's all in the eye of the beholder. But we do need to be aware of all the financial problems in Britain and look for some ways to mitigate. I mentioned in my last video, there's this sort of wave of politicians sort of quitting, and the Irish Prime Minister quit yesterday. From what I understand, they had some sort of referendum at the start of March about curbing free speech and banning, online criticism of the government, and the public totally voted against it, and then the Prime Minister ended up quitting. So this is the trend. It's cutting off dissent, it's cutting off freedom of speech, it's cutting off people's right of freedom of expression, freedom of the press, and because, the politicians and the powers that be do not want the public to, be aware of the kind of things I'm talking about and the things that you're listening to, because it's inconvenient for them. They want to perpetuate the fraud rather than be exposed as the fraudsters. So a lot of interesting things going on. I think more of these things are going to continue through the year. More inflation, more cyber attacks, quote unquote attacks, and more politicians running for the hills. Obviously, Putin in Russia won his election, which the British called a sort of a whitewash and anti-democratic. But of course, Rishi, he was never elected either, neither by the British people nor by the Conservative Party, because he lost his party election to Liz Truss, who said she was a fighter, not a quitter, and then she quit the next day. And Rishi, he didn't even bother going back to the voters. He just decided to take over. And, we criticize Russia for their anti-democratic approach, justifiably. But what about our own? What about David Cameron? Who elected him? Didn't he have to go through the House of Lords to become Foreign Secretary? It's total fraud. And, it's what the powers that be are all about. So, not a great situation. The great thing for you and me is that we have loads of opportunities around the world to invest, to live, to lead a British life, and to lead a British life based on British values. And that can be done inside Britain, and if it cannot be done inside Britain, it can be done in plenty of other places. So exciting things going on, which are potentially dangerous, but potentially opportune as well. I want you to send these videos to your friends and family so that we can keep getting the word out and keep talking to each other about what we're seeing and hearing in our own communities, and, keep sharing information that's helpful to all of us. So thank you very much for watching this video today. Really appreciate it. And I'll talk to you soon.